Hello, welcome from the Curmudgeon in the Cellar. Got a lot of interesting things to talk about, so bear with me and we'll begin. First off, the adventure you say will be published, which company will publish it, so we'll know what to look for. It's one of the companies I'm working with now, with, however you want to put it. It's called Old Guard Games, and I'm going to give you the web address here in a minute and an answer to another question. But everything I'm going to be doing now and everything I can see in the foreseeable future, except for a project I have going in Brazil, will be done to Old Guard Games. And they're affiliated with, part of my overall sponsors company. Who came up with the name Dungeons and Dragons? Gary's kids. I asked him that myself. And he said they bandied about a bunch of things and they were trying to be alliterative. And the kids just decided that Dungeons and Dragons was it. It captured it. Remember, all his kids had been playing one way or another, limited or not, or not. Depending upon their age, even the girls were drafted into play at times. So I think I was told that they were sitting around the table, whether they were collating or just sitting around the table and brainstorming. But I'm real sure, and I'm sure if you ask Luke or Ernie, they'll tell you the same thing. The kids did in aggregate. Which one uttered those words first? Couldn't tell you. Next. Okay, this is it. All right. I am going to do this. I'm going to put links to my sponsors in the description of the video. I know I've been saying this for a while, but we are trying to work out a piece at the end that I'll have some graphics and they'll be all there. I'm going to tell them to you right now just so you can write them down, which means I have to put down my glasses, but I'll keep my head down so they don't flare. Bards of Greyhawk, and that's bardsofgreyhawk.com. World of Game Design, and that's WOGD.com. On Facebook, look up Old Guard Games. Dice Fanatics. You can go through the RPG store, all one word, rpgstore.com. And there's even a link to Tim Kask and the Old Guard on that. And my video guy who puts this together for me, and he can only do so much with what I give him, is Biggest Fan Productions. That's biggestfan.net. And he's actually in Thailand. So we have an interesting relationship, and I will put these into the description so you can write them down later. Good point, and I'm sure my advertisers are going to thank you for pointing that out to me. We're still working on it. I'm not blaming Old Guard or not blaming Bards Greyhawk. We're kind of waiting. They're working on some music, and hey Bards, we need the music. Come on, get going. So that's where we're at on that right now. All right, what's next? Okay, more requests than a question. Okay, the second half of this, an anecdote. A co-worker in her late 50s who just started playing 5e. She has often asked me how to play or play better, to which I've stated your maxim. If you're getting 5 or 6 people together and play periodically and you're having fun, you're doing it right. And you're right. And thank you for repeating that. It's no great pearl of wisdom. Confucius didn't come up with this. It just seems to make sense. If you're having a good time, then you're doing it right. You're doing it right. I always wondered why you didn't call this show Curmudgeon in the Dungeon. Because I thought it was too cute. I didn't want it that it wasn't, if it'd been a perfect rhyme, maybe. but it wasn't. Not enough syllables. It didn't. So I just went for Cellar. Cellar's kind of more of a bomb shelter, storm cellar type image. And I like that one better anyway. So that's why it's the Curmudgeon in the Cellar. And I'm 70 years old and from the Midwest. And basement, cellar, when I was growing up, were pretty much interchangeable depending upon where you lived. If you lived out in the country or that, it was a cellar. And if you lived in the city, it was a basement. And I had family in both, so I grew up using both. Okay. Oh, no. All right. I'm going to stop here. If you've been watching my show for any amount of time at all, and you don't think I asked something, well, go ahead. And if you've only been watching this a little while and you got a question, go ahead, because I don't really throw away questions or not answer questions or comments. So if I did it once before, if I've done it a bunch, then I'll give you a short explanation if I remember. So was there ever a point, to your knowledge, that Gary, Dave, or yourself went full fanboy when meeting a celebrity, since most of the authors were such an influence you had pressed prior to the creation of the game? Yeah, I can speak for Gary and I can't speak for Dave. Well, the only time I ever saw Dave act fanboy was around M.A.R. Barker. He was playing his game, but he was also, obviously had him on a very high esteem. But with Gary and I can think of two, certainly. We all freaked out we were all just tickled pink when Fritz Lever came. And Harry Fisher came with him, who was an added treat. I've got a picture of myself and Harry and Fritz on a stage somewhere from the banquet, and absolutely that was a fanboy moment. And I was just as impressed when I met Gardner Fox, because I had read a little of his stuff. But while I'm not a comics guy, the comics that he was involved in and helped create and write blew me away. All right. I mean, just because I didn't read them didn't make me, appreciate what he did. So I think Gary and I both, Gary maybe not as much with Gar, that's what he asked us to call him. I certainly geeked out on all three of them. And then I was at another con a year or so after I left, and I was on a panel with Marion Zimmer Bradley and Orson Scott Card. Orson Scott Card was just ascending, and of course Marion Zimmer Bradley was there, and we talked about fantasy and fantasy gaming and stuff, and I felt pretty privileged to be on that panel, because that was just like 81 or 82 in Salt Lake City. So that was my geek boy moment. Yeah, sure. I think we all. I think that's I think it's a good thing for us to experience that. Small r reverence or small a awe at somebody that has done something that we really admire. Example, Hans Cumming has written 5 really, really good fantasy books. Duopoly, or whatever you call the first 2, and then a trilogy following up. And anybody that plays D&D ought to, read these books. When I first met him, he was just a really unassuming guy, and he presented me with some of his books at a GaryCon. And then after I read them, I geeked out again at meeting him. Wow, this isn't just another guy. This guy is a writer. So I think there's nothing wrong with that. I've enjoyed meeting other people. I know people geek out sometimes when they're introduced to me, or I introduce myself to them, or I just stop and talk to people in the hallway and they see my name badge. I think it's a good thing for the human experience to have that thrill of meeting somebody that we've only thought about before. I don't always understand why people get it when they meet me, but I understand they do, and that's it's very humbling. But yeah, we geeked out. I think everybody. I don't think I'd be friends with somebody if they didn't geek out to somebody else, because that would mean they think they're superior to everybody. And yuck. Oh, let's see. Okay, man, I wish Gary had done something like this. Tim, you have a nice stronghold here. All right, then this gentleman asks a series of questions that I'll answer one at a one. But at that beginning, I'll point out that posthumously, there was a collection of Gary's posts on his Ask Gary Gygax thread on N-World. Now, these threads are quite interesting. They reflect over the period of time that they were written. You will find reflections and changes in Gary's answers and responses as he's evolving his new game system. I have no idea how big his thread was. I know Frank Menser and I have a couple of huge threads that are now locked over on dragonsfoot.org that are the same type of thing, answering questions, asking for interpretations, telling stories. There was a book put out, and it was called Cheers, Gary. This is what it looks like. And it was sold for the, I got to make sure the light doesn't glare on it wrong here. There we go. That's a little better. It was sold, the proceeds of which were supposed to go to the Memorial Fund. The same Memorial Fund that's not had anything done to it, and the money's all in question and whatever. So I'm certain there's no more of these being sold new, but you may very well find one online, eBay, whatever. I don't know. But there's a lot of interesting reading here, particularly if you never met the man himself. I was interested in it, watching how his design philosophy had changed from when we were working together. And so for that thing, I found it interesting. So, cheers, Gary. Let's see. All right. What's my favorite character class? Well, I probably answered this before. I don't have a favorite. I'll be honest. It's not a cop-out. I like playing dwarves, just because I have a certain soft spot in my heart for dwarves. If I was going to play, I think if I was going to be a human or some part elf thing, I think I'd go for druid or ranger. I just like the affinity with the wilds. Now, that makes it kind of tough because most people play indoor adventures, but that's why I write so much of my adventures outdoors. And there's a bunch more. A little personal plug here. I have. We've already redone the first half of the Weaver Queen. I don't know if we're going to change the queen, the name, title, or whatever, but it's the original. I'm almost finished with the second half, and when that's all done, I'm not sure whether we're going to kickstart it or as a project or what. But I've got 7 or 8 others, some of which need buffing, some of which need culling, that one of which is enormous that I plan to publish maybe sometime later this year or early next year. It's huge. It's an entire campaign almost, not just an adventure. That's when I went the other way when I was first writing. A lot of my stuff is outdoors. This huge one has a lot of outdoor interaction to get to some place to go underground. So that's probably why I lean toward that. My favorite spells, oh Lord. Spells are, I mean, for pure sheer don't fool with me. What beats a fireball? But spells are so situational dependent that I don't know how you would choose a favorite one. If I was a bush wizard and all I had was a fireball, I'd be happy. Even if I can only throw it once a day. Oh yeah, that reminds me. I'm going to talk about another game. I have an initial report on Escape from Dulce, and talking about the grenade. That was a big part in the game we played the other night. Okay, back to this. Spell. I don't really have a favorite. I like the illusion. I love the illusionist spells, the high level ones. I love those. I love the effects you can do with that. That whole mystical illusionist type thing I find very appealing. All right. These are some interesting things that I'm answering questions. I've talked about this before. Were the blooms the key contributor to TSR's fall? Or did Gary just stretch the company too much? All right, I'm going to parse this question. Yes, the blooms ran the company into a toilet, buying fleets of automobiles and thinking about getting a helicopter until they realized they'd have to have a pilot on call, and maybe that was just a little too much, and all sorts of ridiculous things. So that allowed other people to come in. She who should not be named, for fear of conjuring her, continued to destroy the company by using it as her personal checkbook. Now, there were two occasions when the company was in such dire straits that they begged Gary to come back. And he did. And he turned it around, worked the miracle, got the cash, whatever it was. And they showed him the door both times. Why he even accepted the second time, the opportunity, is probably nostalgia for the company he started. And he got it out of the morass that she'd run it into. And out the door, he went again. So, no, Gary didn't stretch the company too much. He made his biggest mistake was letting Kevin and Brian have free reign. They did waste some money when they did the thing out in Hollywood with the animated series production thing. Yeah, they lived high on the hog. Some of that probably could be considered waste. Is WotC's version of D&D so different that it almost becomes a different game? No. WotC, Wizards, particularly 5th edition, remained true to the spirit and the ethos of the game. And while I think some of the, 2nd edition was a moneymaker because TSR was in deep shit. And I mean, there's books published there that don't even have Gary's name on them because he was out of the company at the time. And then, into the toilet. So WotC did 3 and 3, 5 and 4. And they signed it, in my opinion, it appears that they gave it to people that didn't really understand what they were doing. And it was horrible in many, certainly the editions, in my opinion. And if you're playing one of the editions, that's fine. Okay, here we go again. I'm not trying to be a gatekeeper. This is my personal opinion. You asked me if I thought WotC. I thought that some of those editions were pretty strange in the way that they varied from what I thought was the initial spirit of the game. It's my understanding that 4, which apparently was very quickly rejected, 4 was so involved that it was like playing a video game on the table, and took a couple 3 hours to do an encounter. This is the complaints that I've heard. It was always D&D. They were just trying to see D&D from a different perspective, a new angle, and they weren't always successful. 5, I believe, brought it back to to the older original vibe. I have to be so careful now which words I use, because then I become a gatekeeper again. And I'm not trying to be, truly. That's my opinion. No, they didn't ruin the game. Yeah, it's still D&D. And if you're playing it now, fine. And I know lots of people are playing 5e, and that's great. And some of them come over and have played in my bizarre Wheel of Blame games, and have said, well, yeah, okay, fell right in. It was cool. I felt it. So, oh yeah. There are games for racing vehicles. Yeah, how many different kind of cars do you want to race? You can race spaceships in the Great Space Race from Kinzer. And that, by the way, is a very, very fun game. That's like having chariots that are spaceships and laying mines, and oh man, that's a good time. Was ever considered a game for racing horses? Why? So many had already been done. Horse racing games date back to the turn of the century, the 20th century. I can't remember which century I'm in now. They date back to the turn of the century. There were bagatelles where you just spun the counter and went so many spaces, and it was pure luck. Horse racing games have been a feature on the midways. Since that period of time, mechanical horses, and you bet your money on who came in first, in the next race. Every major board game company and just about every board game company tried it. Even the ones, lots of ones that are no longer with us today. No, we never went that way. Brian had a bizarre boxing game that he was fascinated with for the longest period of time. And it was during the period of time when the little pocket games had come out, and we were looking for a short, quick game you could play a couple times on your lunch break, that type of thing. And we had this little boxing game that was really the only sports game that, while I was there, that I ever saw any interest placed in. And that was very limited. And I believe later something might have come out after I left, but while I was there, no, we weren't into racing games. And Circus Maximus was already out, so Chariots had already been done. I can't. That's a game that needs no improvement. Have you checked out Bard Games' Arcanum system from the mid-'80s? If so, opinion. Yeah. I was just unimpressed. That's all. No slur intended. No, it was, at the time, there were so many, I'm going to use a selection of words here: clones, spin-offs, knockoffs. In my opinion, I saw them as yet another knockoff, another spin-off of what we had created. And I looked at them, and unless they were outstanding, I just Maybe I was feeling superior at the time. I don't know. It's possible. I was a lot more arrogant in my youth. All right. What do I think of Dungeon Crawl Classics? In my opinion, it is the only modern game that effectively recaptures the same wonder, mystery, and thrill that I experienced when I first played D&D. I completely and thoroughly agree. I've talked about DCC a couple previous times, and I'm glad to talk about them again. It is a wonderful game to introduce people to role-playing. You go into a funnel with a stack of first levels, dead. Okay, go on to the next one. All the time you're figuring out how the game goes on, and it's whoever's on the top of your pile at the end. Hey, he's now level 1, and you get to go on and play again. I think it's a wonderful game. I think you put your finger on it. The mystery, the excitement is there in this funnel game. You know, what's your next guy? Oh, I'm John. I'm a farmer's son, and I have a broken hoe. And okay, let's go. And, I loved it. I still do. It's a wonderful concept. For the same reason, and perhaps even more, I also like Mutant Crawl Classics because it's got the same start at the bottom, work your way up, and oh God, what's going to happen to us next? And I think we get jaded playing high level characters, and I think it's fun to go back and scrap every now and again. Scrap. And that'll bring me up to the next topic we're going to talk about. I have an interim report on Escape from Dulce by Demented Cow. Good name. Good game so far. Some drawbacks. Good game. There's a steep learning curve and way too many fiddly bits. That said, 2 weeks ago we tried it out and did absolutely horribly. We triggered the worst possible result on the second room, and we got smoked. Basically, it was so bad. We were so beat up afterwards that we decided that 2 nights ago we would start again from scratch, and we all played the same characters and everything. And we did much better. In about 2 hours, we got through. We got out of the bottom level, made it into the second level, and had about half of it figured out. And it's a very fun game. It is. It's role playing on a board, but it's like having the character assigned to you. Okay, this is, one of them's a 2-headed cow, but hey, get a weapons harness, and that becomes a 2-headed tank for the group. And the cow takes a bunch of hits. And who goes into the room first? That's a really important thing. Cow's not real fast. There's a whole family that's all fused together. But hey, they can make 2 attacks a turn. Everybody else is doing one, whack, whack, and they're immune to radiation. And it's like being assigned these bizarre character types. I play an alien, and Rhino plays a different kind of Rhino plays some kind of space dude. And we're having a lot of fun with it. They just recently put out a download that you can print off all the levels, so you can mark where you've been and what's left, and so you can suspend the game. Suspending the game. Here's where we get into the fiddly bits. This game has so many pieces that I was not going to snap open that many Ziplocs every time I wanted to play the game. And it was like that old thing. Some of us learn how to slip open small zippies, bud bags, we used to call them, between our forefinger and thumb. But, oh no, man, that was way too much. No. Way too many little fiddly bits. The number of counters is quite impressive. The board itself is really impressive, and you could only have done it with a Kickstarter. You've got 5 levels up these girders, and each one is, more dynamic than the last. It's a very dynamic board. You hop from one to the other as you get your way up to the top. There's 5 different kinds of things you can run into as you're trying to make your way out. Now, each of these things is numbered and has a card, because each of these things not only has different initiative values, some are slow, some are fast, they have different kinds of attacks and different numbers of attack. Some of them will poke the guy with the highest armor. Some of them will poke the guy with the best health. Some will poke the guy with the lowest armor. You don't know. Each card's a little different. They hope they only got 2 in a turn. So it's interesting, and you need the cards, and there's an initiative, still a separate board that you need the initiative on. Now, each of the cards has a corresponding stand-up figure on a plastic base and a round counter that goes on the chart for where you are in the initiative each turn, at which number do you do your actions. And we have found that the little stand-ups, to put them all into the room and all that, is superfluous. It clutters up the game. It's too much fiddly bet. If you want to do it, hey, that's fine. We've decided not to. The little round counter on the initiative board is plenty enough, and you take the card off as they're slain. That's plenty to keep track of what's going on. You need the card to see what they do. You need the counter to see who's still there. That's great. There's a whole lot of little fiddly bits, plastic things that slide around on the plasticized character sheets to keep track of your levels, your hit points, and things like that. The sheets appear to be plasticized, and I'm pretty sure that a wipe-off will work on there. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to. As you increase your various skills, right now it's got little counters. If the wipe-off works, I would suggest marking them off. When you suspend the game, get your phone out and take a picture of everybody's sheet. That way you got your hit points, you got your current health, you got your level, your points, all there for next game. Mark the little sheet. Okay, this one's been done. These 2 rooms are been emptied. Okay, this is the alarm level we're at. Great game to suspend in that way, easily suspended. Lots of little fiddly bits, a gazillion little bitty cards about this long. One deck's at least this thick, and I have no idea how you're supposed to shuffle these. Because, of course, they all come linked together, the 3 of these and the 4 of those and the 2 of these. And so you got to shuffle. Those little bitty cards are a nightmare. All the other cards are really nice. The counters are good quality. The stand-up things are great quality. It's just a lot of fiddling. And it looks to be a very fun game. And we suspended, and we're going to finish this level at least in 2 weeks. So, hey, cow guys, I think it looks like you got a winning game here. All the little scenarios that are provided with it afterwards, I think are what are going to really make this fun once you mastered it and figured out how to do the long get out. Then the scenarios are going to make it even more fun, more playability. And of course, you can go escape. It doesn't matter. The same things aren't going to be in the same rooms. So it has that replayability that I very highly value, is particularly on a game that you invest that much in. Thank God we had a grenade. I went into a room that had a whole bunch of bad stuff in there. And I got beat on, and I was still alive. And when I got my action, I threw that grenade in there. I stood and I was willing to take the grenade for the team who were all outside the door waiting to come in. And I fragged everybody in there, myself only mildly. So when they came in, they had a much easier time. Thank God we had the grenade, because if it hadn't worked, the next thing I was doing was throwing the smoke grenade, which gets you safely out, and all those guys go back, and it's though, nothing happened in that room. We didn't have any grenades, obviously, the first time we played, and we've actually found a couple of better weapons. So yeah, it's a fun sci-fi RPG. Just enjoy playing the character you got. Do what they do. Use what they're best at. The character I am has this mental psionic weapon. He can do this stun once an encounter, and check it out. Pretty good. Let's see what next. Oh, apparently, well, I seem to have found out what the sin was that I committed a couple of years ago. Sin. Apparently, I was guilty of mansplaining. Because I offered to run a game for wives and girlfriends that were bored. And I called it an all-lady game. And apparently, I was going to mansplain them. Now, I understand the general use of this term. But with over 40 years experience DMing and a master's degree in education and teaching experience, I don't think what you could call what I do mansplaining. I think Aristotle called it teaching. But anyway, I have a tale of woe to end this with. Last week, we had one of those another wonderful rainstorms that came through that are absolutely can't possibly be caused by global warming. That's why we're all drowning in this part of the Midwest, the eastern portion of the Midwest. And I lost a 45 foot American spruce that I've been growing for 25 years out of my front yard. Now, the timing on this was just impeccable. We had just had to rebuild the front porch, portions of it, because the wisteria bushes had been destroyed part of it. And that tree was the shade for our front porch. And the ground got super saturated. And it went over. Insurance doesn't cover it. Everything we had to expend over $1,000 to get it cut up, root hogged out, and hauled away. We get to write off on our taxes. Whoopie-doopie-doo. I don't have 25 years to build another tree, to grow another tree. So I'm trying to figure out how to get a big, a tree with a big root ball that's like 12, 15 feet tall already. Put it back where it was. So it changed my pergola and porch again, where we had been planning to go out and have breakfast in the morning. And it's going to be a lot of money. Maybe I'll start a Patreon. We'll call it Buy a Tree for the Curmudgeon. I don't know. It's going to be a lot of money. And its loss has been a considerable blow to the value of our property. Because we did have only two of the large trees on the block, the only two large trees left on the block. And now we don't have the largest we've lost. So can't do this. Don't have 25 years to grow another one. So I'm going to figure out how to do this. And on that note, I think I'm going to end for the evening. And I will publish the sponsors' websites at the end. And remember that if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you can go to the RPG store and look for my name, and you can get a free set of dice. So everybody needs more dice, right? I was talking to a friend about that today. I seem to be a dice accumulator without ever trying to be a dice collector. He goes, what do you mean by a dice collector? And I said, well, I know people that have 220 siders. That's a dice fanatic. And oddly enough, it's one of my sponsors. Last plug. Arrivederci.